What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Dr. Nessim Show. Today, I have an amazing guest with me, Eric Miller, who has served over 20 years in the financial industry and co-owns a national financial planning company dedicated to serving the needs of healthcare owners. He has personally had over 20,000 conversations with practice owners at every phase of ownership. He has published countless articles, videos, and podcasts on various financial topics and is an expert on matters concerning creating economic independence for a practice owner's business and household. He has recently published a book, How to Become a Financial Beast, which quickly became a bestseller on Amazon. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Good to see you.
You too as well. And thanks for coming on. I'm very excited to talk to you as someone who will hopefully soon be starting a practice. But I'm going to probably hit you with a lot of questions that are even top of mind for me. But before we get into that, can you just talk about, I guess, how you got to this phase in your career and in specifically helping healthcare owners in their practice and with financial independence? Because I think it's kind of a unique niche career.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. We made the decision to start a financial planning company in 2008. I don't know how old you are right now, but 2008 was like the first global meltdown of financial crisis that we had. So it was a perfect year to start a financial planning company. I come from a healthcare background. A lot of my family was in healthcare, still are. And I saw that they were, most of them were getting pretty cookie cutter financial advice. And I saw that these are people that help patients in all different areas, and we wanted to help them financially. And so we decided that that's who we were going to work with, the people in the healthcare profession. And then I learned really early on that if I was going to be any good at what I did, I had to know a little bit more than what the average advisor knows about just debt and investing and all these things. We had to know about what your biggest investment was. And for a lot of owners, that's their practice. And it is a generator of wealth. It can obviously scale. And right now, with all the money coming into healthcare, these practices have real significant value. So I had to understand how these practices work. And that's been our that's kind of our origin story of I don't work with engineers. I don't work with teachers. We only focus on working with people in the healthcare industry.
Got it. Very cool. And I imagine, would you say it's changed from, I guess, when you first started your company and you were working with these physicians? I would assume, I know there was a stat, like it was, I forget what year, but it was about 80% of physicians were private practice owners themselves. Now it's closer to 20%. So have you seen a shift in the last many years of you doing this? And also, do you see the pendulum swinging back in any way, or is it just continuously these private practice being bought out?
Well, yeah, private practices are, look, I mean, the story is old as time. Bigger guys want to gobble up smaller guys, and that's going to continue to happen. I think that it's still a very fragmented industry. And again, you're talking to like a lot of different areas. We have veterinary medicine, you have, optometry. I mean, there's all different types of disciplines. So I still love the private practice owner. I think that it's still no matter, what the climate is right now, I still think it's a good time to own a private practice. Probably never been a better time, because there's always going to be bigger groups out there that are going to look to acquire, a really well-run practice that's focused on, the investment value of it. And so I think that's where a lot of people are missing the boat by just working for somebody else.
Right. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And even like speaking to some of my co-residents, I know now, because it's not really taught to you, as you're going through training, oh, you can go be an independent business owner. It's more like we work in academic medicine. So that becomes the natural path afterwards. But if someone was like just starting out, or even if they're middle of their career, and they came to your firm, what would be some of the first things that you would be doing with your clients?
Well, the first thing I do with almost any physician is I try to tell them, like, you keep thinking like a practitioner, you're going to have the money of a practitioner. If you want to have the investment experience, like, someone that's a higher up, like a private equity owner or a guy like Warren Buffett, you got to think like an owner and investor and not so much a practitioner. And that kind of like shifts some gears on people because they're like, wait a minute, that's I'm here because I like the medicine. I like to do this. I'm like, that's great. You have to be good at that. But if you really want to take it to another level of wealth, you have to think more like an owner investor. It's probably one of the first things that we do is just change that, because that gets them looking at their practice as an investment and not just a job. And obviously you'll then have to do all the things that an owner investor would do to make a practice valuable, and some of the what areas you need to look at so that you can make it really valuable.
Got it. So are you helping, or maybe you're doing both, but are you helping physicians and healthcare professionals start that practice, or is it more the financial planning aspect? Like, let's say someone who has a practice and they're coming to figure out how are ways I can just make my overall financial health better?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like the definition of financial planning is how you manage the resources of an entity or an organization. Money comes in, where is it going? And is it going to further the value of that organization, whether it's your household or whether it's your business? So, I mean, I like to talk to people in all stages. I certainly like to teach people early on, like some of the things that you need to do right away if you're thinking about buying a practice, that you're gonna have to encounter, some of the challenges, and most importantly, how to make sure that you have your money right, and that you really have an idea, because they didn't teach you guys how to manage finances in school. They didn't teach you how to look at profit and loss statements. They didn't teach you how to look at the balance sheets. They didn't teach you to look at cash flow or anything of those things. So those are some things that we certainly we'll review with our clients to make sure that they're doing the right things.
So if you're working with someone who's looking to buy a practice, are these already usually established physicians? Because I'm thinking some new fresh grad who's about to go into practice, like where do you see them getting the money to even invest in a practice for themselves?
I mean, it all depends on the industry. Some banks are very willing to lend in certain industries. Like I'll give you, I don't know how you guys feel about, veterinarians. I mean, obviously they're pet doctors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Banks love them. Banks will give veterinarians unlimited amount of money because the default rate is almost zero on that. Okay. So certainly there's opportunity out there. How bad do you want the practice? Because if you want the practice really, really bad, you're going to find the money. Okay. Like if I told you, like, you had to save your child's life, you need to come up with $50,000, even if you didn't have it, you're going to come up with $50,000. It's the necessity
100%.
level,
Yep.
that is where money comes from. So I think a lot of it is, the deals, the mechanisms of how to acquire a practice. Should I go, get a loan? Where do I get that loan? Can I make a deal with the current owner where maybe he can sell or finance a part of that? That I think there's a lot of owners out there who have zero exit strategy, that don't have their practices for sale right now,
Right.
but secretly they're thinking, how the hell am I going to get out of this thing?
Right.
So you can find them out there. You just have to look,
Makes
and how bad do you want it?
Makes sense. And then someone that let's say you're working with, what are some of the big financial mistakes that you see healthcare owners tend to make in their financial lives?
God, it's 12:11. We can probably be here until like 4 o'clock. I think the biggest thing is the undervaluing of themselves and how they compensate themselves. And because once you get a practice, it's like, oh my God, like a patient comes in, like this may work. I may actually be able to do this. And then you remember when it was really hard. And unfortunately, what happens is a lot of them either they don't have control of the money. So if you don't have control over money, it just goes everywhere. And
Right.
and that's what happens to an organization a lot of the times. The other problem is that they hold on to the money so tight that they forget that they need to invest that money or reinvest that money, or to have a plan of where it's going to go so that they can create, more from it. But I think it's again, I'll just go back to it. It's the biggest mistake. Well, I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is they underestimate how much they actually need in income, assets, and resources to live the life that they want to live. That's
Makes
like the
sense.
fundamental thing is how much they actually need. And, I guess what I mean by that is if you talk with people in our industry, the financial industry, you probably heard, hey, you need to save, a couple $1 million in retirement accounts. And by the time you're 60 years old, you should have enough to, live a comfortable quote unquote retirement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound all that appealing to me.
Right.
And the number that you need is way more than that. If you really want to have like a dignified, like be able to do whatever you want to do. So I think it starts there with like really having the right numbers, having the right targets of what you need.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, so like you kind of alluded to physicians not paying themselves enough, or sometimes they're not investing enough back into the practice.
Yeah.
How would you advise someone to do that if, let's say, they're starting their practice and they are running on thin margins?
Mhm.
What's some of the advice that you give for that?
Well, I still, even if you're running on thin margins, even if you just start your practice, like you can get the habits in place of where the money's going to go. Like you should map out, okay, $1 comes into my organization. I know where 99 cents is going to go. And then that's going to establish for you what your necessity level is for that practice. Like most people that we'll talk to, a practice owner comes to us and said, I'll ask them, hey, what's your make break number? And they'll give me a number. Now, when I say make break to you, what do you think about when I say make break?
When I hear that, I'm assuming like the break even number of the practice.
Just a break, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm bringing in just enough to cover my quote unquote expenses.
Right.
Right. So the thing that we have to re-engineer with a lot of people is that would you consider your profit an expense? Meaning that would you need to include that as part of your make break number? Most
Right.
people would say no. I say you absolutely have to. And I would say that when you look at most practice owners, they're probably underestimating their true make break number by about 20 to 30%. And
Gotcha.
that's why that's why it's tough. That's why it's like, can I expand? What do I, can I pay my taxes? Can I pay myself more? Because you haven't factored all these things in. You're just looking at your cost of goods sold, you're looking at your staff payroll, you're looking at your rent, but you're not figuring those other things as necessary
Right.
expenses.
You're not, and you're essentially saying you're not looking at the profit of the practice either. You're just hoping that there's some profit left over, as opposed to we're going to shoot for I'll throw it out even $500,000 of profit, so we have to add that to the total gross that we're looking to hit at the end of this year.
That's the number.
So that
Like
all our numbers line up.
Yeah, this is where necessity comes from. Like I said, most people are underestimating how much they actually need. And it's how you have to plan for income. You have to actually map it out, and you have to make sure you're including everything, which also includes paying yourself, paying your taxes, reinvesting back in the business. Those are all things that are quote unquote necessary, but most people just omit them.
No, that makes sense. I was in preparation of this interview, I was watching some of the other interviews you've done, and you were speaking with a physical therapy owner and talking about that like a decent target was like 10% profit, and then like a efficiently run practice would have been, or therapy practice would have been about 20%. What are some of the profit margins you see for specifically private practice physicians when you're working on them, and what would you say is like a good target to shoot for that shows it's an efficient practice?
Yeah, physical therapy kind of is pretty bad when it comes to profit margins in that industry. If you're doing 20%, it's like you're doing really, 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 really well.
And when I heard that, I was like surprised by how low that sounded. So now I'm like trying to readjust my own expectations. Not that it's exactly the same industry, but that's why I was curious.
I think 30% minimum should be what you should be able to do. Now that 30% profit margin isn't all going to go to you personally. Some of that is going to get reinvested back into the business. Some of that's going to go to your household. Some of that's going to go to taxes, because, the profit of the business is going to give you tax liability. So all that 30% needs to be like, compartmentalized and those things. But I would say that if you want to have a practice, should be at least doing 30%. Now, dentists they're like 40-45%. But I think that 30% should be a minimum of what you should target. That would seem
Interesting.
to be like the minimum amount for the risk that you're taking,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, if you're going to put in all this work and then you're taking 10% of the gross amount the practice makes, like at that point, you could be an employee with probably less hours and make more money.
You've heard of like owner burnout before, like
Mm-hmm.
guys burning out. That's typically what I see is that when I look at why people burn out, it's their profit margins stink and they're doing all this work. You're taking all this risk, and you're not getting compensated for it. And there's nothing that's more, I think, that wears on a person is to put a lot of effort into something and then
Mm-hmm.
not get that back.
Right.
I think that's where the burnout comes from.
Right. Is that, are those the typical clients that you see that are then coming to you, or do you work with clients, who are trying to get ahead of the game as well, who are doing well? When does someone typically come in and utilize your services?
Oh, we got all kinds. It's for me the most fun that we have with clients are people that are taking their practice business side seriously, have accumulated some money, and they just don't know what to do with it. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
am I doing the right things with my money? And am I using it for other things other than just leaving it sit in the practice? Now
Right.
what's my plan for my household? How do I create multiple income sources? Where do I invest? What debt should I pay off? What should that look like? So that's fun for us because you've already kind of handled the big problem, which is making the money, and that's the first. If I have a triangle of like, okay, what are the 3 skills that any owner should have? Number 1, you got to know how to acquire money. Number 2, you got to know how to control money. Number 3, you got to know how to expand money. And acquire money is the tough part for a lot of people, and control of it. But everyone wants to talk about investing. Hey,
The
Eric, where are we going to put
expansion.
my
Yeah.
money? Where,
Right.
should I buy index funds? I'm like, dude, how about the first 2 of these things? Are you on the right path, with the acquisition of money and controlling it? Then we can talk about all the investment side.
Mm. So in terms of, I was going to jump to that third part question,
Yeah.
but now I'm going to jump to the first 2 instead.
Yeah.
So what would you say are some of the levers that practice owners can pull to, like, if they're not doing well, be more efficient with your practice? I know we kind of touched on like adding profit as an expense, but what about like I don't know how much you do in regards to advising on the operations of the practice, but I guess you could see the financials from the outside. Like, where do you see people kind of burning money and the waste that comes with the practice?
Yeah, it all depends on what the kind of practice it is. I mean, each kind of practitioner has certain expenses that are maybe more, but it's kind of similar. Staff pay is going to be the biggest expense, and getting people to like understand their positions and produce is
Right.
something that a lot of physicians are going to have to realize. Like you have to understand, you have to have executive skills. You have to know how to get people to cooperate, coordinate, and get things done. And I'll just hire someone to do that. Okay, great.
Right.
But that sounds great, but you still got to know, so you're going
Yeah.
to have to invest some time in your executive skills. And then as an owner, what's the vision for the organization? Are you making sure, because people don't, I mean, as much as we say it, people want a good paycheck, but they also want to know that they're making a meaningful difference in what they're doing. So how do you motivate people? Do you have a good culture of the organization? Someone told me like there's 2 miracles of business. And the first one was the day that your first patient shows up. I think that's a miracle. And then the second miracle was when you got rid of the person that you like, and you'll find this out when you own your practice. You really won't realize how how much effect one person in your organization can have on the revenue, on the culture. And this is where a lot of owners actually fail, is they don't know how to let go of people, and they keep people around that don't want to be there and are sucking them dry. And that's probably one of my best pieces of money advice for a practice owner is like, actually look at your staff. If you got rid of one person that is causing a lot of havoc,
Yeah.
your revenue would go up 20 to 30%.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense. I have I run an academic consulting company that I've been building while in med school and residency, and and I employ a decent amount of staff through that, mostly independent contractors. But you're
Yeah,
so right. Like anytime I have to have that hard conversation, it's like not something I'm like inclined or comfortable to do. It's very hard to get over that. And I imagine it would be the same way, and how I could see how it would bring down
nobody wants to do
a
it,
practice.
but it's magical what happens when you get rid of it, that person. It's just magical. It's one of the most unusual things that I've seen in my time. You know what
Yeah.
happens to a practice when it gets rid of all the, call it, counter intention. Like you have an intention, and then some people just counter that. So these are
Yeah.
some of the things, the nuances that they're not going to teach you in the Wharton Business School.
Right.
But you realize these things early on.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I culture, like even going through residency, like the different people you work with, that can make or break the environment and how motivated people are, and
Yeah.
that translates everywhere. You also mentioned the executive skills and kind of having to know, like, how do you even, like a doctor who might hire someone for billing, they don't know it. I don't know much about billing right now. I'm sure. I mean, I know a little, but I'm sure the amount of research I'll have to do moving forward is a lot. You have to almost figure out, how do you know if that person who you hired is doing a good job? How often do you see that doctors rarely even have like KPI metrics for their practice at
Uh,
all?
I think I've seen more people that actually will say KPIs. They
Than have them.
they'll have them, but then they don't know what to do.
I
It's
see.
one thing having an indicator. It's the next thing of, what do I do now that it's okay? I see a stat. It's either going up or it's going down. What do I do? Like if it's going up, what should I do? Okay. Well, the first common sense would tell you, if I see something go up, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to keep doing what the things are doing, right? Some people see a stat go up and they can't help but try to change things, which is the exact opposite thing of what you should do. Okay. So it's one thing to be able to look at a statistic. It's another thing of like, what do I do? Like if I'm seeing that my statistics are going sideways, what do I do? you
Right.
know and the answer is, I need to promote more, I need to produce more, because you're never going, so you're right before a fall off, there's a level off.
Yeah, it makes
And
sense.
yeah, we've seen that a lot with a lot of practice owners that just think that they're winning by going sideways, and I'm like, no, you're about ready to fall off if you don't do something. So I think the skills of knowing what to do and how to analyze statistics are really important. Don't make it complex. Maybe pick like 5 to 7 really key performance indicators, but also know what to do when you see a stat going down or up.
Makes sense. How often, how often do you see, let's say there's someone, a doctor or veterinarian or dentist, whoever it is, they really want to have their own practice, but they're just not good with those executive skills? Do you ever see someone bring in someone to manage more of the business side? And then if so, you know, that probably is a big financial cost or you're giving up a lot of equity in your practice to bring in someone that is worthy of running the practice from a business side. Or do you really preach more like someone, like you just kind of have to learn and develop those skills as a physician?
I mean, look, we usually say that you have 3 roles. You got your owner role, your executive role, and your practitioner role. Now it's when you first start out, you have to really do all 3, but there's no way long term that you can do all 3 effectively. So you're going to have to determine, what kind of owner do you want to be? Do you want to be the guy that owns the practice and then does the practitioner work, which is fine? Make sure that you hire someone that can be a very effective executive. An effective executive is obviously someone that can coordinate people, can get along with people, but also can get people to get their work done. Okay, they're there's probably a lot of characteristics we could talk about. Or you could be the owner that says, no, I'd like being an owner and an executive, and then at some point in time, I'm going to give up my practitioner role and just have multiple people that are doing, associates that are doing it for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it work both ways. I've had people that have done it both ways, but at some point in time, you're going to have to make a decision of what you like to do, and just know yourself. Like, you seem to be a guy that likes to do the practitioner work, you know. And
I Yeah, I like seeing and by practitioner work you mean seeing patients?
yeah,
Yeah, I do. I also actually love running businesses, so I
Yeah.
could see myself like in an owner role too. But to be owner, executive, and like you said, practitioner seems like obviously in the beginning when you're starting out, most likely you have to do it. But at some point, it might be their upside to bringing someone else in is just all I'm thinking about.
Yeah, because I had to do that because I was the only advisor for like 5 or 6 years, and then there came a point in time I was like, I see my appointment book. I got 7 appointments a day. I don't want to do this forever.
Right.
Like there's things I want to do, so I had to make the tough decision of how do I do this, and really it's just making sure that you write up your hat, so to speak. Like what are the successful actions that you have as a doctor, in my case as an advisor. Write it up completely, how the standard of how you expect people to be treated when they're in that exam room, and anything can be duplicated, okay, if you have the right people. So I know a lot of people think, well, there's no one that can do it better than I
Right.
can, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody that can, of course I had that, like there's nobody that can be
Hmm.
it. But people surprise me all the time, and I can honestly say that I have advisors right now that are better than me at financial advising, because I didn't have the what's the term? I don't know. I didn't have the idea that I was the only one that could do it.
No, that makes sense. I think uh, it's a very the classic mindset. Oh, no one's going to see patients as good as well as me, but there are other amazing doctors out there. Now, if you want to
Yeah.
obviously see patients, you could always. I could see myself like seeing patients very heavily early in my career, and then slowly like taking a step back in the amount of hours, but still always maintaining some
Have a
level of
small
exactly.
That's where
Yeah,
I'm at right now. The term I was looking for was hubris. I didn't have the hubris to
that's
think that I
yeah,
could
yeah.
do it with everything myself. But right now, I got like a handful of clients. They're people I really, really like, and that are, all, most of them have either sold or, for, $10 million, $12 million, or, have practices that are doing, you know, really, really, $5 million or more in revenue.
No, that makes sense. What would you actually? It's a wealth of knowledge you have because I don't get to hear the like what the classic numbers really are for someone that would be. What would you say like the average practice is doing in gross versus like what one single location can do? I know it's obviously going to be a range, but
Mm-hmm.
efficiently,
Yeah.
is like a 5 million? Can that be one location, or is that usually going to be a multiple location
I mean,
practice?
it's a big location. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about, it's again, you have to look at like what's the size of the location. I mean, how many people can you see a day realistically, right?
Right.
I mean, there's only so many bricks a bricklayer can lay a day. There's only so many people a physician can treat a day.
For
How
sure.
big is your space? How many doctors could you have in that space? How many patients can they see a piece? What's their average transaction for that space?
Hmm.
And one of the first things that I would do if you're going to start a practice is look at it and say, what is my facility capacity income goal? Like, I'm going to buy this brick and mortar place,
Right.
10,000. I mean, in Manhattan, I can't imagine.
I
It's
know
like,
it's so expensive. I
yeah,
even looked at every.
you may want to move to
I
Long
walk.
Island or something like
I walk down
that.
Park Avenue and I look at the all the private practices there, and even like I can't even imagine what they pay just for the small space. And then I'll look at some of the other spaces, and it's crazy the cost per square foot.
Yeah. So outside of like, the most expensive real estate in the world, that's what I would look at. Like, how big is the space that I need? And then can I fill it up? And then can I hire other associates to work for me and I'm looking at this thing as an investment and not just a place to work. That's the thought process. That's my best owners. That's how they think,
Yeah,
and, so yeah.
makes sense. No, I like it. All that stuff excites me, like having to learn and grow and figure out the business aspect. Um, I enjoy, although I know that's like not always the case in medicine and people
No.
that are trying to be physicians. And so I feel like especially now, I mean I could be wrong, but it seems harder, at least, even though you said it's a really good time to start a practice in the sense that like if you did want to sell, there's private equity and these big conglomerates buying up practices, but it almost seems a little bit harder to get started these days.
It probably is. I would really encourage people to try to latch on to like a mentor first, and just get your practitioner skills really, really good first and foremost. Like really be a top-notch practitioner. And then figure out from there, and then just observe what the owner is doing, observe how he interacts with his staff, observes how he treats his staff, observe how he looks at money and how, the environment of the practice. Just start taking notes of like things that you may do differently, things that you really like that owner does. And, hopefully at some point in time you can be that person's exit strategy. And,
Makes sense. Yeah.
you can start from scratch. A lot of people do, but I think it's easier now to, find someone that, has something existing and just make it better.
Cool. Awesome. So moving on to the next portion. Now, let's say you have someone with a successful practice. The person you said is like that ideal client for you to work with. What are some of the mistakes that even that person's making, who's done well now with the practice? They're making the money, but now they're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with this surplus?
Yeah, I got money now. Where do I allocate it? And that gets into a lot of things, because there has to be a balance between consumption. Of course, you want the bigger houses, you want the bigger cars, you want all the nice things. And then I don't want to rely upon the business for the rest of my life as my only income source. Okay. So should I buy the building? Absolutely. If you can get your location. Now, again, New York, it's going to be tough for you to be able to do that, but maybe you can at some point in time.
Yeah.
Have a
Or
bunch
maybe
of
we'll do it
partners.
like you mentioned, a suburb, Westchester, or something outside of that.
Somewhere around there. I love having the buildings, because none of these private equity groups ever buy the buildings. They just buy the practice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then when you clients sell to them, they're still owning the building?
Sell the
Most of
building,
the time?
and now they have like a 10 to 15 year triple net lease with a corporate owner who has a very little chance that they're ever going to move.
Right.
And you just get the rent, step up 2 to 3% every single year, and it's like mailbox money. It's awesome. I had a client today that sold for $10 million, and he's getting $15,000 in rent a month.
Wow.
Okay. And
that's awesome.
buildings paid off, and it's like a core income source for him. So buildings, obviously try to get your building if you can do that. Other than that, I think it's making sure that the practice is kind of feeding the household. And we generally will carve out the first 10% of the practice revenue. So if you got, let's say you're doing $2 million in, like, what's real to you is like a $2 million practice. Is that a decent practice for you? 3 million?
It's hard to, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'll be doing like sports, pain management / potentially aesthetic medicine. So there could be areas that are like high margin cash based procedures, but I honestly, I haven't figured out what that actual gross amount. 3 million sounds like a good target number for gross for like a location.
Great. So let's say your practice doing $3 million. Okay. Now the first thing that I would have you do is take the first 10% of that revenue. Okay. Because it comes in throughout the year, right? So $300,000 gets separated out into what we call a wealth storage account. Now it's just a bank account that you own, but that money is designed for you now to invest personally into other income sources. And whether that's additional real estate, whether that's maybe another business activity, or whether it's stocks and bonds or insurance-based products or whatever it is, okay, that money is designed for your household to start to insulate it from being dependent upon the business itself. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. Now, my question is, you're saying of 10% of the gross revenue. So now this is considered technically a profit that we're using to invest, or are we investing?
Correct.
Is it an expense? Okay. Yeah. So this is profit that we'll pay tax on and then invest.
We're going to pay tax on it. I'll worry about the tax liability later.
Okay. Sounds good.
Let's get the money going in the right direction, and then we hire the accountants to try to minimize the tax liability. Because that's that's what their job's going to do.
So first 10% is for investment.
The first 10% of revenue, not take-home pay, of revenue is for your household investment. And that right there is a game changer. Once you can do that and get that habit in place, then, everything's just easier. Because now, okay, I do that for 10 years. I probably got close to $5 to $6 million of investment outside of my business just by doing that one action right there. But you got to make it automatic. You got to make it systematic. You can't it has to be kind of part of how money comes in. It's expensed out into
Right.
that wealth storage account. Okay. And then you have to like resist the urge to blow that
Use it for
money
anything else.
on
Yeah.
something else. But that's an awesome thing to do. And once you do it, man, that's how, people can quote unquote retire early or just be able to do the things that they want to do. But I don't get too, like, when it comes to like investing, I don't get too complex. I mean, you can, there's private placements and, fancy things that people that I think I see physicians try to get into. I just try to keep it semi-simple.
I like that. I think I see, because I look and see all these different physician investment groups and things like that. And I think that people are, I mean, I'm like invest in the S&P, maybe a few other things that are high risk, but like keep it or invest back in my business. But
yeah,
I like, my concern would be getting too fancy with it and losing a ton of that money.
well, that's what ends up happening is that because everyone has an agenda. Like if, most financial advisors, and I am a financial advisor, but most of them get paid on you putting money into like public securities, like stocks and bonds. And a lot of them will shy away from like insurance-based products or real estate. Why? Well, just for a number of reasons. We've set up our business where I don't care. I think stocks and bonds have a place. I think insurance-based products have a place. I'm talking like annuities, cash value life insurance, those kinds
like
of
whole
things.
life policies and things like that.
I think that real estate has a place and other business entities, and then reinvesting back into your business. I think all of them done correctly with a strategy and a plan offer certain benefits that are going to be beneficial to you. Okay. One is not so much better than the other. Obviously, some have higher returns, some have higher risks. Trying to build a household that is impenetrable and, has income from multiple sources that you can't possibly outlive. And that's what we're trying to do. So we have to think a little bit beyond, because I see a lot of doctors that, that'll get on TikTok and, give us their investment advice. Probably maddens me like what maddens you with people getting on TikTok
and giving health advice.
Advice, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of garbage on TikTok.
There is a lot of garbage on TikTok.
There's good advice too, but that's why you need the people that have sound advice to be on there as well.
Yeah. Like I saw one of your videos where you're kind of breaking down, I won't mention it, a famous influencer that, going over somebody's blood work and everything like that. And I was like, dude, it makes sense. I mean, this guy's, you could see what you thought was right, what you thought was wrong, and what you thought was kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I got a lot of hate for that video because these people have diehard fans.
Yeah. It's
but that's
okay,
good.
Man.
It means I'm striking a nerve is probably good. It's better for the people on the fence.
Yeah. I don't think you did anything that was like, whatever.
No, I try to keep it like, I'll even to someone I completely disagree with where someone is right as well.
Yeah.
But
that's the right way to do it. Yeah.
Sometimes there are a lot of claims that are made and I'm sure it's the same for financial that I'm like, I can't not comment on it.
So I probably I haven't done any of those reaction videos yet, but I mean, maybe if I get a bigger audience, I'll start doing some of that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. So I mean, just to kind of summarize, diversifying so it's more impenetrable. If one income source, something happens, you have these other areas. Some of the things would be you're taking 10% of your money and of gross revenue. So realistically, let's say we're running on 30% margins, that would be like 1/3 of your take home pay.
Yeah.
And putting that towards investments, whether that's retirement accounts, like general stock market, real estate, specifically. Yep. Would you like going to owning the practice as the first set of real estate? Because I know there's like people that buy multifamily. That seems too much for me to want to like. That seems like a whole nother business that now I have to operate as well. Yeah. I like the idea of like investing and owning the building that you work in as like the first place when it comes to real estate.
For sure. I would do that. And then as more money comes in and you have money set aside in your buckets, then look, you can find good real estate operators out there where you're not having to actually manage it, and then just find people that know what they're doing. And I think that's a skill,
that's the key. Yeah.
Is being
Someone
able
who
to
knows
say,
what they're doing.
how do I identify someone that actually knows what they're doing? And they're out there. There's plenty of people out there that know what they're doing in the real estate market. And but make sure that you own some of your own too. And diversification obviously is a key thing, but that's really kind of more towards the middle and end of your career where you're thinking about that. First thing you're doing is trying to get that main money artery, that practice, really humming and purring. That's the first obligation that you have. And then from there we can carve out the money from it to then do other things.
So would you say, like, earlier in the career, do you change that advice? Maybe invest some of that 10% goes towards reinvesting more aggressively in the business, or is that a different bucket?
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's I tried to keep it separate, and then just make sure that you're making enough money for the business. Because that 10% that we have take out in the wealth storage account, there's three other accounts that we have set up. We have a business savings account set up, so you have some a cushion there. We have a tax account set up so you can pay your taxes. And I have what's called a business expansion and development account, where you would allocate money so that you can reinvest back into the business as well. Like percentages may vary, but it's going to depend upon your profit margins and such as well.
Makes sense. And this is more, you're having your clients open kind of just 4 different checking accounts so that it's siphoned off, and they're not touching money from different, or trying not to touch money from different buckets.
Yeah,
it's so just going to where it should be.
Getting them in the habit of how to systematize and make things automatic and systematic. And what that does is it puts the right demand for money on the practice. Like, this is how much we need to bring in. So now I can get everyone involved, and then I can bonus them, reward them if we hit these numbers, but I'm not operating on a number that's incorrect. That's just the worst thing that most people do. And then they wonder why they don't have enough money for anything. Their target was wrong.
Makes sense.
Their target was wrong.
Awesome. I know we've kind of gone for a while, and I appreciate your time, so I'll end it soon. But what would you say, like, is one thing that doctors, like the biggest, we kind of started with this, but mistake for physicians or healthcare owners with their finances, that if they could take anything away from this podcast, like, that they should not be doing, or we can make it something they should be doing that they're not?
I think we covered the pay yourself first, the 10%, which is generally a pretty big one. I would say just early on, make sure you develop your financial team, and that you really get a team that knows where you're going. And when I say financial team, make sure that you have a really, really good CPA that also does some tax planning. And if they don't, they can refer you to people that do, because you're going to need that as your income goes up. Obviously, make sure that you're working with an advisor. Of course, I'm going to be biased on this, but someone that understands your industry, because I think it's very, very valuable in working with people that understand your industry, that are involved in your industry, because they can kind of see all the nuances that other advisors won't.
100%.
And just building that financial team, obviously you're going to need a good attorney for certain things. And just, build that team. I think that's a mistake. A lot of doctors, obviously, are self-sufficient, self-determined, don't like to take orders.
It's true.
It's okay to have a team.
But yeah, no, I agree. The best thing, I mean, we kind of try to learn this as we go through training, but is to know when you don't know something. And hopefully, I imagine that's someone who does that ends up doing better later on in life.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, Eric, I really, really appreciate you coming on to the show. Where can if they're early on physicians or physicians in practice listening or watching this, where can they find you and learn more about your services?
Well, you can just go to Econologics Financial Advisors. That's a kind of a long name, so we'll just say econologics.com. And that's probably the easiest place you can set up an intro call. We got plenty of things that you can download and such.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Okay.